Bohemius' Journal, May 17th, 2026. Time. Time is a crucible. You must spend it willingly, accordingly, and fulfillingly. Time is a catalyst of life, and all its events that go down within humanity. Time does not fix everything, and it can never fix itself. In this world, time is a blessing and a curse. It's what constructs our present and future, yet corrupts and intoxicates our past that can guarantee the way we live, think, and feel. Time is as much of a gift as it is a parasite that tampers with our lives. But another parasitic entity plagues upon our world. Hate. You see, this world is in dire need of love, but this world lacks love, therefore making hate fill in its place throughout the people and communities among us. Fandoms are no ideal exception from this. The concept of the fandom has been twisted into dark forces of hate that makes almost all fandoms cringe and unbearable to live in. All those degenerates, false prophets, and mindless sheep falling into another trap, all of them fueled by hate, the same entity that powers all fandoms. To everyone in popular and niche fandoms like the indie animation community and the communities of other indie animation shows, hate is being stranded in the middle of the ocean on a rubber life raft with the person you loathe the most, and you will knife a hole in the raft just to see the look on his face when he realizes what you've done. Until you are prepared to do this, you have never hated as much as them before. You are hated by them as equally as you hate them for hate. It's almost depressing as it is cynical to live in such a world where the internet can form fandoms that absorb such a power like hate. Heard joke once. Man goes to doctor. Says he's depressed. Says life seems harsh and cruel. Says he feels all alone in a threatening world where what lies ahead is vague and uncertain. Doctor says treatment is simple. Great YouTuber iDubbbz is in town tonight. Go and see him. That should pick you up. Man bursts into tears, says, "But doctor, I am iDubbbz." Good joke. Everybody laugh. Roll on snare drum. Commentary creators turn libertarian. Drama slop YouTubers support Israel even more. 1877 cause for kids. All that terminally online nonsense. Curtains. But it's not gonna help me feel better from enduring all this hate and fandom shit on the internet I ought to put up with. Also, I just completed an entire week of enduring final exams, so it won't help me with that neither. There's no reason for me to live! No reason at all! Huh? Arby's? No. It's never built on satisfaction. But hey, look at all the meats they have! Yes! I will do it! I will live! Oh man, Arby's is so good.
As I suspected, you've poisoned your funny immune system. Oh, and you have AIDS, diabetes, and ligma.
Ugh. Damn nurse practitioner misdiagnosing me. What happened? Isn't it obvious? No, seriously, I thought I was eating Arby's to cure my depression, only to fall into a near-death coma the next day. You ate Arby's? Man, what did they put in those meats? Enough to briefly shut down all your organs and nearly put you in a coma, dumbass! Hey, come on, I can still do a review. My channel matters. No, it doesn't. What matters is that you got critically food poisoned by Arby's because you ate a gross-looking slop sandwich full of toxic slop and human feces made by some Freud. Huh? A Freud? As I suspected. I hate Freud, and Freud's hate me. Either they're going, or I am going. And I am certainly not going, Spider Kid. Now stand back while I get ready to review Slop. It's a difficult responsibility that you accept from the #1 reviewer, me. Have it known throughout the net from fandom to community. There'll be no more dumb asteroids to the king. I have been advised by my legal consultants to not continue this song as it contains hateful and bigoted lyrics and imagery that doesn't fit YouTube and this channel's values at all. I said that lolicons, Loud House fans, and Israel are poopy heads. In terms of shaping an indie animated project or amassing the popularity for it, there's no escaping the truth that fandoms are the ones behind it. Now, if you are in the indie animation community or are fond of indie animation as a whole and not just a community, then I am sure most of you clearly know what a fandom is. Technically, it's another word for community, especially for an online community. There are fandoms for shows, movies, books, artists, and especially content creators. Indie animation is no exception from that concept of fandoms because, boy, indie animation is one huge fandom, and the fandom keeps getting bigger and bigger every time a new project or show is introduced to the sphere. Because of the will and intent to create, the indie animation community has gotten so big that it often branches out into other communities based on the more popular shows within the indie animation space. That means more fandoms created by a fandom. I mean, shows like The Amazing Digital Circus and Lackadaisy have sprawled into their own fandoms despite being accounted for in the overall indie animation fandom in general, and it goes the same for every other show and the fandom they created as well, despite initially stemming from the general indie animation fandom. No matter how big or small the show is, it's almost pathogen-like. Fandoms spread everywhere in the wonderful world of indie animation because people keep creating projects that are worthy enough to attain that cult following which generates those fandoms. And if you're someone like Plain Rock 124 or the legendary Tony Zarrett, whose ill intents are to troll, rage bait, or play with that fandom as recklessly and satirically as possible, or someone who's severely antisocial and forever burdened by so much internet drama, nitpicking, and fights, whose childhood of being online and hanging around in the wrong places with the wrong people from the ages of 9 to 17 mentally traumatized me for life, or physically damned my poor health and performance, like yours truly,
I'm getting a really good vibe about you.
Then you're going to eventually come across the fact that fandoms are overwhelmingly inevitable at this point. Fandoms sink their own ships, but they also patch holes and drain out the water so they can get back to floating on the sea of the internet again. They can be wholesome while bearing a Chernobyl-sized amount of toxicity filled with people full of hate. And hate is what brings the death and destruction to those fandoms, but also enlightens the certain ones in it, and love and compassion is what fixes them, but burrs the others of the action and thrill of declaring your departure from it, like an airport. But this world lacks a lot of love these days, especially with the unprecedented events going on that make us all doom post and fearmonger about what happens next, because we all have our own problems and we all hate our lives. It almost sounds like you people want an apocalypse in this world, and a majority of people who wanted that are in the indie animation community, but there is also a vast percentage of folks who don't always agree with each other or stick to their moral compass in the fandom, folks who don't know anything and often render themselves to be stupid, careless, or just too incomprehensive to fully understand the context of what's going on and how to approach it, instead of making an ass out of themselves or other people. And I know a lot about indie animation to not wind up like those people, even as somebody who's legally but not severely autistic. Trust me, I spurg about indie animation more than the others do. I spurg for real 24/7, no joke. But I also know my shit. And over my time on the internet guiding my conscience through the industry and the community indie animation built with fellow peers, I now know more about indie animation more than the average knucklehead in the indie animation community or other communities and fandoms like TADC or Hell of a Boss. But given how I usually hold my foot down in YouTube instead of other sites that thrive on indie animation like Newgrounds and Tumblr, I will say this. There's a certain rhythm to these things. A new indie animation project shows up on my YouTube feed, I make a video on it, it surges in popularity after I upload it, and the game starts all over again. Only now, thanks to the impact of fandoms and many viewers growing weary against watching newer or more sophisticated content because of them, especially lower viewer rates on my channel ever since I entirely cut off Twitter and Blue Sky from my life, I have this terrible feeling there's really nothing good to review. Without indie animation, this channel has no punchline. This is why I think indie animation is a thing that needs to be studied. It should be approached professionally and observed from a sophisticated point of view, and therefore should be analyzed and documented on, so we can properly understand that indie animation is beyond just means of creativity and getting back at Hollywood and the hardships of the animation industry. It's like one of those lol cows, for instance, albeit you won't ever see Jack wearing a Sonichu necklace, singing different lyrics over a Backstreet Boys song, or Blitzer looking like a crackhead and wannabe juggalo, or Go-Go from Punch Punch Forever boasting about working for a greedy multi-billion-dollar game company for 7 years, while shaming those who partake in video game preservation, or hell, even watching a kid from Gameoverse make a shitty food review about trying Wingstop for the first time, while Caboodle is having a mental breakdown on the streets of New York over a stranger telling him to put the fries in the bag. And today, we are gonna prove that indie animation is more than a thing that should be praised by reviewing one of them. This is Plinko and Mark. This This pilot has been under my radar for quite a while now, but Plinko and Mark is a supposed animated pilot created by Thrash and Bash, an indie animation studio that isn't really much known for anything other than Plinko and Mark. Seriously, their YouTube channel has only 8 videos all about Plinko and Mark, so I'd assume that this is the studio's only work that we know of. Or perhaps this studio was formed specifically for it only. But hey, who could blame them? With over 600,000 views on the pilot and another YouTuber covering it famously being Jellybean of all people, who ironically had a cameo voice role in it, it does seem like it can attain some pretty high numbers given the vibe of it. But you know, it is also a mystery that we haven't heard from them lately, considering they aren't very active on social media, and their last upload and overall channel activity is around 6 months ago, which coincidentally falls on the same day of my fourth and last update video when I announced Season 2 of Indiehemius. Where have they gone with the show afterwards? Are they still working on episode 2, or did they just call it quits after the pilot? Maybe there's a very special reason why we haven't heard an update from them so far. Like perhaps they need more time with the world building. But nonetheless, wherever they are, it's not gonna stop me from reviewing this 7-minute pilot. The bad news is that it's another slice of life. Aww. But the good news is that it's not another furry cartoon I'm reviewing, sort of. Yay! Because this looks like something completely different from the last few shows I've reviewed so far. So let's get on with this, shall we? The premise isn't too hard to follow through. It's about this wanted cat burglar, Plinko, in a fictional city called New York City. Heh, I see what they did there. One day, Plinko decides to drop the burglar gig for a more efficient way to earn money, getting a job. So he follows his F-shaped piece of string roommate, Mark, to work at the pizzeria with him. But then Plinko causes trouble and Mark thinks he's already fired, until he finds out that the pizza was a huge hit amongst customers and everyone loves Plinko's pizza because he put literal trash on it. I mean, Plinko literally admits it, and the crowd still goes wild over it. Like they aren't that excited to eat literal garbage. So much that chaos ensues in the store and Plinko and Mark are both fired from the pizzeria, with Plinko offering Mark a gig to rob banks with him. And that's how the story pretty much is. This takes a different turn like the other slice of life indie cartoons I've spent showerless days covering, whereas this time it takes place in a workplace. While the pacing is nice, almost above average for something like a 7-minute pilot, there's one problem I come across it upon watching it. It's not funny, and it isn't engaging or thrilling neither. The pilot's humor is tremendously weak and far less chaotic and random than the previous works I've seen. The jokes seem very predictable, and it doesn't have that spark to pull through in being hilarious. The same with the character expressions. They just seem stale and bland. That contributes to the humor's predictability and mild action. Now, I get that this is supposed to be a wholeheartedly slice-of-life pilot with subtle humor, but the humor in it is way too subtle and mild that it makes it less fun to watch. I get the chaotic intentions with what they were going with the concept of a normal roommate and a wacky cat burglar, but it just doesn't execute that conception properly or well enough to a point where it can be an enjoyable watch. Instead, it gets paired with subpar humor and dull character writing that makes the pilot mild instead. It's pretty boring, even boring for a show trying to follow generic slice-of-life plot cliches. And its ability to not make me laugh at all just atones to the overall mildness of the pilot, even more rather than the madness of it. Even though the story structure is well followed and the pacing is great, I can't truly enjoy this pilot because it is boring and not even slightly fun in any way. The animation for Plinko and Mark is a completely different story, because unlike the boring and unfunny writing I've mentioned before, the animation is pretty good, albeit not as extravagant as the others, but at least it does compensate for some of that mildness in the pilot. Yes, it does rely on the typical Newgrounds style animation techniques that some shows I've previously covered also have, like Pain Girl and Wastelandia. Its limited animation with squiggly outlines is something I'm no stranger to watching, but always delights me when it's used in a good pilot or show. Its art style is also remarkable and eccentric enough to be suitable for a pilot like Plinko and Mark. You can tell what the studio was going for in designing the characters and overall world of the pilot, making it look modest yet strikingly retro with a chock full of early 2000s aesthetics. This applies to the shading and lighting of the animation as well, and it's very likely to fit within the atmosphere of Plinko and Mark the studio expected to create. What I also like the most about the animation is that it's overlaid in a VHS filter. It's subtle, but it's just right. The VHS filtering doesn't really try hard in making this thing look like as much as analog horror slop or anything from the 90s or early 2000s as possible, yet it doesn't resist hiding itself from the screen to express their desire to emit their own retro vibe from this cartoon. The VHS filtering is something to be admired in this pilot because it's not overly flashy and effect-pilled like whatever those analog horror logo kids do on the Vegas Pro video editor, but it's light and crisp enough to the creator's likeness, no matter how artificial it is. Apart from the tremendously unfunny and bland writing that brings out the worst in the pilot, the animation, including the cherry on top VHS filter laced with it, is something I can truly appreciate in watching this. As for the characters, let me just say that they aren't as slightly terrible as the story, but they aren't as equally great as the animation either. To start things off, let's say that the character design is just weird. I'm not saying they're entirely weird, it's just that some of the characters don't rub me off the right way. I mean, for Plinko, he looks like anything but a cat, at least not anatomically. His entirely black body and limbs don't make good chemistry with that head and those sneakers. Is it some kind of bodysuit thieves like Catwoman would wear? If so, then why does he wear it every day, especially around the time when he's not committing any crime? Maybe it's part of an anatomy as a whole or some shit. Plinko's smile also creeps me out as he doesn't open it at all while he's talking, making the lips form words and sounds as he continues to speak. By God, was he born with that toothy grin that will stick onto him for the rest of his life, or what? It's like if Dr. Livesey if he looked less more like a cat and more of a homunculus wearing a latex suit every day. Freaky. And Mark's design is even weirder than Plinko's. Its animation executes it just fine by how it's drawn, but I still question the taste of Thrash and Bash when they came up with illustrating this guy. Of course, there is some lure to this, as according to them in a shirt, New York City is supposed to be full of cats, dogs, and another type of creature known as a symbol, and with the concept art for this symbol minority, I can try to glue together what they were going along with in drawing them that accurately represents a symbol, but I can't comprehend on how well this fits into the city and canon universe when they were written to live among cats and dogs. I don't think Mark looks like a practical symbol at all. He just looks like a giant letter F with a small head. It's just so odd to see him live and talk like this. Perhaps the studio wanted to create Mark as originally a stick figure, but then got distracted by Mike Salcedo's Alphabet Lore series halfway through their concept and were inspired by the evil letter F. You know who I'm talking about. I don't really feel comfortable with Mark's design or Plinko's design at all. The rest are perfectly fine, no doubt, but it just rubs me the wrong way that they look like this, or even live with each other.
Слово «рум» и слово «смерть» для вас означает одно и то же.
Anyways, moving on, I will bridge over what I've said about the story's writing over to the characters' writing as well. The characters are very boring. The writing for them is just as painfully bland and unfunny as the plot. plot and humor of the show, they all seem to act very predictable and sort of overly obvious for most of the part. Like if they were written to just stick to the script and nothing else without any extra excitement or detour, the dialogue falls through the farthest because of it, and I wish they can still maintain their personalities, no matter how funny or emotional they can get. They may not have tried too hard in being funny, which I guess I can appreciate, but they don't really try too hard in being funny or being full of life neither. And that's what links the characters to the boring plot and writing. It carries on that weariness onto them. However, not all has gone to waste. I can say that for sure the voice acting is decent. There is a little bit of spark in the VAs playing Plinko and Mark, and the others despite the lazy writing. Even Jelly Bean poured her heart out into voicing her cameo role in the pilot. It isn't the best, but it's probably the only thing I can salvage from the characters about them at this point. But for the rest of the characters, they're as boring as the story and their designs, and are a bit too whack for my taste as well. Ultimately, Plinko and Mark's pilot isn't very good to my standards. I'd say it's around the same level as what I'd rate Get Fatter Now and Wastelandia as, but instead of the corny writing and humor that infuriates me, they both really have no effect on me as they try too little or not at all to please me. In terms of being unfunny and the other two shows I've covered, ironic speaking how Plinko and Mark is supposed to be a slice of life like Wastelandia and Get Fatter Now, but if I had a nickel for every time a slice of life cartoon Byodo infuriated the hell out of me, I'd have 3 nickels, which is enough for a kind of Chef Boyardee in the 80s. Well, there are some things to salvage from this pilot like the animation, VHS filtering, and slightly above par voice acting. It's probably the only things carrying this pilot at this point, as most of the source material comes off as unfunny and fruitless and somewhat pathetic. Plinko and Mark is a very boring pilot, and it may be one of the most boring pilots I'd ever have to sit through, but you know, most of the pilots and shows I've reviewed often continue in a grand way, or in some rare cases, publicly call it quits in response to the views and videos they get on it. But for Thrash and Bash, they don't seem to be really anywhere actively giving us updates or behind the scenes footage of the next episode to come. Wherever they are, I'm sure they are hard at work cranking out that next episode or revitalizing its concepts. To produce an actual first episode that's part of a season, animation does take time after all. It's not like they'd completely abandon their audience after the pilot, right? Which is what I would be saying if the last upload wasn't 6 months ago. For real, even after the pilot was released and gained a sizable viewer count despite it being their only project, I occasionally question where have Thrash and Bash went afterwards. With a seemingly explicit lack of updates or channel activity from across their socials, it baffles me that they aren't keeping us up to date with this pilot. Not as much as I thought, but at all. It's a mystery of what happened with them after they released it and still haven't shown up for it ever since. Aside from providing us the soundtrack, maybe they've disbanded after realizing it wasn't a good idea or moved on to do other projects aside from Plinko and Mark, and decided they weren't going to go through with it being a full series. But I probably shouldn't make it sound like too much of a mystery out of speculation, since I have to be mindful of the people who actually enjoyed it, unlike me. Hell, some of them are still out there to this day advocating for a second episode or some kind of update. They probably haven't forgotten about it neither. But alas, my verdict still stands that Plinko and Mark is a boring and unfunny pilot, and I hope the team behind it can do better if they ever get around to continuing the series from this point forward, or if they even will at all. But no matter the inactivity, I'd still give it a second chance in its next installment, like almost all the other ones. With that being said, this has been another Indiehemius review. I've been Bohemius and... I don't feel so good. My tummy hurts. That armies really rocked me earlier today. I can't hold it much longer. I gotta get to the bathroom again. It hurts so much. My local city food is very good, but the Arby's and its close geographical location misunderstood. It hurts, hurts, hurts. It really is a knot. It hurts, hurts, hurts. I like toxic slop, oh my god. It hurts, hurts, hurts. I drink and drink, but it won't stop. It hurts, hurts, hurts. In my gut and tomorrow in my butt.
Tell me why I'm stuck as a